go way back but haven't seen each other in a really long time. We used to like just have office space at the same building in downtown New York, and I remember when you made River of Grass, and the first time I saw that movie, I was just blown away, and remain blown away by that film, because to me it was speaking to this idea of taking a genre and sort of blowing it up or doing something different with it. And I'm so curious to hear about this latest beautiful film. What was the kernel, or what was the first moment of inspiration? How did you arrive at the story?
Through a long road with the writer Jonathan Raymond, who I've made many projects with. We started out going to Vancouver with the idea of making a biopic of a little-known painter named Emily Carr, and she had 10 years where she was a landlord in hopes that would give her more time to paint. So it was a little-known painter during her sort of dormant years because her tenants took over her life and she didn't really get to paint. And then we went to Vancouver and found out she was a huge national icon and her statues of her everywhere, and she's a really famous painter. So that we changed course and came home and turned our sights closer to our own world of art makers that we know in New York and Portland, and sort of just, sort of kept some of the same ideas of, figuring out how to balance life and work. And there was the school in the film is the Oregon College of Art and Craft, and that was a really fundamental place for the pottery and ceramic scenes in the Pacific Northwest. The school's over 100 years old, and it shuttered its doors in 2018, which is the year we set the film. And like many art schools in the country, closed down. And so we really wanted to incorporate that in that school and that place. And so that's those were some of the beginning seeds.
That's something that really struck me about the film, that it had such a sense of place, and it had such a sense of a community of artists, that there was sort of there was no specter of one gigantic artist. It felt much more like sort of the complications and the thorniness of people supporting each other, but also competing with one another to some degree, which I think you see between Lizzie and Joe in a way.
Yeah.
And I was very moved by that.
Yeah, and they also, I think, respect each other's work. And so we wrote the script with the work of Cynthia Latte in mind, and that's Lizzie's work. And she's a Portland maker, and that John goes way back with, and I've been familiar with her work for a long time, and sort of any friend's house I go into in Portland has, it's a Cynthia or whatever, And so it was, designed with her work in mind. And then Michelle Segre, whose work is Joe's work, works in the Bronx, and I really am a fan of her stuff. And Christopher Blauvelt, the cinematographer, and I went to and spent a few days in Michelle's studio in the Bronx and filmed her for a short film I was making. I made a couple of shorts of just people working in their studios, and so just to get an idea of how people work and what they do in their studios and how I would film them for this. And so we had this art in mind, and it was really great that we were able to get that art. And then the visiting artist, that Heather Lawless plays, her work is by Jessica Jackson Hutchins, who has a studio in Portland, and it's a really fun place to visit, and full of activity and just watch someone work in a way that's completely unlike filmmaking, where you just touch something and you make it and you love it and you go home and you made something great. It's done. Wow. So we got to put a lot of friends' art in the film. There's some paintings there's a painting in Joe's apartment by the painter Stormthorpe, who Joe used. It's actually his studio. That's Joe's studio, and in the school there's a very large painting where the guy's vacuuming of Michael Brophy, and that's a painter who has done storyboards for a couple of my films and some of my location. He used to go scouting with me a lot, and some of my location scouts he's made my location photos he's made paintings of. So he's been in Chris Johansson's films, paintings, and Johanna Jackson's ceramics, and just a lot of groovy art that it was cool. It was like people let us use their stuff. So.
Yeah, it felt very authentic. It felt very like a real place of people making real work who had a very specific process. And I'm curious because there's a moment in the film that just knocked my socks off the first time I saw it, when Sean says, "You have to listen to what isn't being said," something along those lines. And I felt profoundly like this is sort of the movie. Everything that's not being said is what's actually driving the story. And so I'm really curious in the writing process and in the conception of it, how much was the notion of a main character who has a tremendously difficult time saying what she means and asking for what she wants in some ways. How was that always at the core of it, or did you discover that?
I think how the term that we first thought of Lizzie as was as a trapped badger, and that's sort of the idea of her. And that whole scene, that's really that's so John Raymond. The writing of that scene, it reminds me of some of the we'll hold them at the fire and talking about string theory and old joy. There's that's really him having fun. But I mean, the school itself was empty when we started, so it was had like a floor plan of the school in my apartment, and we I get to make up an entire school. This is cool. And so Tony Gasparo, the production designer, and the art team just started inviting young artists in town to come work, to make the work that would be the work in the school. And then so that was it just little by little we got the looms in, and every room just started becoming a hive of activity of people making stuff during pre-production, which was just so cool. And then the students, the actors that were playing the students, they were just, it was COVID, so everyone kind of had to be all in. They were in, so they were all getting to know each other, and they had so much time hanging out. They just started getting into the clay and the dyeing stuff and the looms, and then my hair at the end, who's in the credits doing the nodding, she was our head PA, and she taught everyone how to work the looms. And so there was this, and then I'd get to the room and they'd be teaching me what they're doing. And so it did become this place where stuff was being generated and made, and they also seemed to be having a very good time. It's just like cool to go through there and take a little stress break and be like, what's happening here? And I should just say, where I teach at Bard, it was I got to sort of mesh my two worlds together, because Ben Coonley, who built the dome with the projections, he's my colleague out at Bard, and he came out and worked with the art department and did this, so that was really groovy. And there's a lot of Black Mountain College in there, I think, also, and ode to art school.
Yeah, in fact, it's the kind of movie that made me want to be in art school, made me want to work with my hands, to just sort of, and to see what other people were doing. There's that beautiful moment when goes to sort of check out Joe's show before it officially opens, and that was a really interesting moment to me, the idea of seeing her actually really appreciate the work. Was really powerful. I'm curious, when you're working with Christopher, your DP, how much are you mapping out? You mentioned that you've storyboarded in the past. Like, what I loved is how unforced it feels, and yet there are these very potent visual ideas. Just curious how that works for you.
I share a lot of visual things with people in different departments and read a lot of books and stuff, but I start sort of figuring out how I'm going to shoot it when I'm working on the script, sort of after, on my own time, my alone time, and then I usually have for each scene and the locations, like that apartment they're in. I've lived in one of those apartments for a while. I've lived in one of the houses on that street for a while. Not long periods of time, but I've known a lot of friends circling through this street, so I was really familiar with those spaces. And then Chris Blava was living in one, and Tony Sparrow were living in the places while we were shooting the film. So I usually have, I have I'll have, okay, this is. And I have here are the first 3 shots and the 5th shot, and I don't know what the 4th shot is. And Chris, how do I get from 3 to 5? And then we are scouting together, and we're hanging out in the spaces together, figuring it out, and coming up with our plan, and then and Chris is taking meticulous notes, the whole thing, and then so by the time I've been through it on my own and been through it with Chris, and we've done the notes and we go through it many times and get a binder and get. By the time the actors come, much to Chris's dismay, I don't want to look at that list anymore because they call the notes. And then we kind of watch what the actors are doing, and then see if we want to change anything around. So it's like a movie. It's a process. It's a process, and it keeps changing, and yeah.
You mentioned the actors, and something that really struck me about the movie, particularly with Lizzie and particularly with Michelle's performance, was the almost like inherent emotional suspense of an unsmiling woman. She's gripped by so much, but we don't know exactly for quite a while. And I'm curious, as you were conceiving the character, but then talking about that character or sharing the script with Michelle, to what degree do you have a dialogue about what drives that character or what her physically is and all that stuff?
Yeah, that's
trapped at her. Did you say that to her?
Yeah, probably. But I first think I sent her a picture of Lee Bonnecue, the sculptor, and we started there, just talking about, check the script, and I forget what all I gave her, but I know I gave her sent her a big chunk of clay and some tools, and a lot of things were going on at once. So she was working with Cynthia via Zoom for a while, for a couple months, and then she came out to Portland, and our production office everything was set up, like April Napier did the costumes, was all set up at the school. So there's getting into it with Michelle and her figuring out her voice and her body, but a lot happens when I have to go through the April machine and spend time with April and getting really, I think her clothes and her shoes, she likes to, that helps. And then, we had the whole school, so she could really spend time there. So and then her studio, the art department brought everything from Cynthia's studio into the studio that's Michelle's. And, I kept telling Hong Chow, who plays Joe, that you're not Michelle Segre, you're just going to study with Michelle, and you're not Cynthia Lotte, you're just going, but all the work is so personal, and they're spending time with these actors, and so I know other things seeped in, and, so they have their own, just kind of figuring it out, as, they
was really clear to me, you know, Hong Chau's character, the fact that she sort of felt like she really owned the space that she walked in, and she was very in her body, and there was a sense of a kind of just a sort of physical force that she brought to performance. And I loved how that played off of Michelle's inwardness and then, I mean, I loved the idea that this character is studying women and kind of memorializing them in these sculptures. Was the notion of ceramic figures of women in various, was that always part of the work?
Cynthia's work.
So
yeah,
it's just
that's,
always there.
That's what she's doing, like girls in motion, doing things. There is a slight, you know, all those the girls, as Cynthia calls them. There's a little Arrested Development in there. You know, they're all kind of they're girls. You know, but they yeah, in all the posture of the statues, I think that all kind of comes into it too. So, but yeah.
I mean, I also think it's so nice to see something where you walk away from it actually having seen a real shift or a real change, in that by seeing them walk away and be civil to one another, and
Oh no, that's the best part.
it's just so wonderful.
You know, I think that's the best part of, I mean, the displaced anxiety that happens when you have something coming up that you're anxious about. I've just read about this, I don't really know about it myself. It might go in different directions. And within, you know, for every big event that I can think of, like the thing you're, you know, supposed to be aiming for, or doing, or whatever, you know, Cannes Film Festival. My favorite part of all of that is it's over, phew, and the rehash on the walk home with John Raymond or Chris Blava or whoever it is, like the after is really the walk home is the best part for sure. So yeah.
Well, what struck me was that it's this very unromantic portrait of art and art making in some respects. You know, you feel like life intrudes. You know, there's family, there's money, there's no hot water, all of those things. And then the simple pleasure of two artists who respect each other, getting to relax with each other for a second. I thought that was just such a earned sense of pleasure.
Yes. Hanging out. Yeah. That's good stuff.
It's true.
Yeah, so that's the movie.
Because I remember from when we were both in New York at the same time, you shared an office with Larry Fessenden, but now I've just learned it was more than Larry. There were more filmmakers or more people.
They really let me crash there because I really wasn't a total contributor in a financial way. I contributed by taking up space, but it was Larry Fessenden and Ira Sachs and Pete Sillin, the documentary filmmaker, beautiful filmmaker, and Michael Ryan, a producer. He had the night shift, and he came in at night. So yeah, there was a.
Well, it's interesting to see in the credits, like to see Larry's name, to see Todd's name, to see Phil's name.
Like yeah, everyone's still.
And so, do you share your work at a certain point with them, or is it more the thank you for being in my life kind of things?
All things. I've been sort of sharing scripts with, getting notes from the same people for my whole adult life, and Todd Haynes and Larry Fessenden are very different filmmakers, and they both read a lot of drafts and give really different notes, and together scripts, and I've learned a lot about filmmaking from Todd. And yeah, it's been, I mean, it's a community, and it's nice, and yeah. I mean, all these people, I'm talking about everyone in the third person, people are here tonight. Chris, Tony, and April, Todd, they're all from the crew are here. Thank you.
Well, it's an absolutely beautiful film, and you occupy a space in American filmmaking that is so rare, and you actually do live by your own drumbeat, and it is an absolute pleasure to watch your films, and you are a treasure in American filmmaking.